Okay. Hi, I'm Marianne Lee.
And I'm Kylie Dalrymple.
Okay. I'll read the first question. So
Okay.
we just read The Amazing Grace, and so the first question that I asked us to go over is what doctrine in Wilbur's heart drove him to advocate? Why is the doctrine of the family so important to have in your heart to be passionate and persistent?
So I think
Um,
the main thing that drove him to advocate was just the fact that God created, or the main doctrine was that God created all men as equals and that all men should be free. And that's what I kind of got from it. And then I thought it was kind of um, interesting how, like, he kept having the, like, flashes in his mind about that man who's in shackles and stuff. And I think that just really helped him stay driven in his um, whatever purpose, I guess.
Definitely. Because, well, like, so I ended up watching this movie twice because I could not answer these questions, but like there wasn't yeah. But there wasn't ever like a set like this is the doctrine, that's why my like,
No.
why I'm doing this. But I really felt that like he really saw like that um all men were created equal by God, and then like he said men of humanity a lot, and like everyone
Mhm.
deserved it, and talked about that. I also liked, he it was during the movie when he's like laying on the grass and his butler comes out and he's like, "Do you think it's weird? I'm probably laying on the grass." And he's like, Did you find God?" And he's like, "I think God found me." And it was, I don't know, I found that really cool. How he was like responding to God and all this stuff, and felt like he
Right.
really needed to do it. And then it reminded me of like the book we read, The Sacred Duty, when he what was his name, Richard, I think it was, in that, where he couldn't like get out the feeling that he needed to be able to do. And I felt like William and him had like the same type of, or that God was really
Personality. Yeah.
good.
Well, and I thought it was interesting that, like, when he was battling between should I choose, like, religion or should I choose to be an advocate, he was, like, kind of struggling between theology and secularism. And
Mm-hmm.
then the one lady was like, "Well, I like to think that we can do both." And it's really true. Like, we can advocate and still be religious. Like, we can advocate for religion type things. Like, all men are free and God created all men equally, and traditional families are better for children and just better in general. Like, it doesn't have to be a separation, it can be both. Like, you can be, and like the sacred duty, he went and he wasn't, and he did both. He advocated and was on the law side, but also in the religion side. So I thought that was interesting. But I think it's really cool. Oh, and just kind of addressing the second question, the why is the doctrine of the family so important to have in your heart to be passionate and persistent? And I think it's so important to have that passion because that helps you be persistent in your effort to solve the problem. If you don't have passion, then you're not effective because you won't be able to change the hearts of people. You won't be able to stick with it as long as you need to get the issue changed. Like Wilbur, he spent his whole life before he got this changed, before he abolished slavery. But since he was so passionate, and with the help of his wife, he was able to keep going and do it.
I agree with like thinking about like why we need the doctrine, especially when they're advocating. I feel like so you have like the doctrines, you have the principles, and you have the application, but the doctrine is what is like that base. And to me, it's almost like what holds you down. So it's like it almost, everything was falling apart for Wilbur. Like nothing was going right. The bill didn't pass. He was like giving up, but he still knew what he believed because he held on to that doctrine. He knew that he still needed to do this, even though he didn't know how. But it was
Right, the
because of that doctrine.
application failed, but he had the why that kept driving him.
Yeah. So I think it's important that like when we do advocate that we like, sit down and realize like why are we doing this? What's the doctrine behind it?
Hmm.
Like what is gonna fuel the fire to get me, to keep going during
Yeah.
hard times.
Yeah, that is so true. That is so good.
Yeah.
Um, Let's see. Do you think we can move on to the next one?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, so number 2 is how did Wilbur employ a theoretical Bronfenbrenner approach to become a more effective advocate? Identify at least one thing in each system and be specific. So what I kind of thought of for this is he gathered a lot of evidence in support of his cause from like everywhere. And so like for like the microsystem he gathered evidence from individuals and slaves about their experience and regrets of transporting or being slaves. So like I don't know if he was a monk or a priest or whatever they were, but that one guy who he was a slave transporter, and he was like so ashamed and felt so guilty and felt like he was living with 20,000 ghosts. And so that was kind of the microsystem that I had. What did you have for mesosystem? We can just...
So I don't know if I did this right, because I don't know. It's so hard to decide. Like,
I don't know if I did either.
Yeah.
So I gave it a whack.
So it's like microsystems, like all about like your family and stuff, but I also feel like it's about you in a sense.
Yeah.
And so I talked about how when they first like addressed that Wilbur should like go into slavery, he was like, well, I first need to change myself before I can change slavery. Mm-hmm. And maybe I don't understand what he meant, but to me it was kind of like he needed to, change his morals, change his ideas on stuff, or, before he could go out and change the world on something.
Yeah.
And I kind of found that, so it made me think that, like, you have to, in a sense, I thought about it as, like, families. Like, I can't go out advocating for something if I don't follow along with it at my home, and I'm, living it. Like, so that's kind of what I related it to.
No, that's a really good thought, and I hadn't even... That's why I like these so much, because, like, you have different ideas that I had never even thought of, so that's awesome. Mm-hmm. And then that kind of reminds me of when they're playing that card game, and the other guy as well, fetch me my little slave boy, and he just walks out, and he was, like, really affected by that, and I was like, man, and then in my mind I was like, why doesn't he just win and then set the slave free? Mm-hmm. But I don't know. But yeah, that was a good...
I thought that too, but I think for him it was like he didn't want any part in it,
Right, he didn't want to justify any part of having slaves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's evident in how generous he was. Like if a homeless person would like knock on his door, he would offer him dinner or clothes or something, and he'd always have his butler come get him and be like, there's a homeless person at the door or whatever. And so I think that's really evident in what kind of a man he was.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I thought it was really cool how they highlighted how he advocated for like protection of animals. They said that like, and everyone's
oh my gosh, weird. Oh, when they were beating that horse in the beginning, I was like, oh, I don't want to watch this.
I know. I was like, this is uncomfortable. Like
I would have punched him out. Gosh. Yeah. Okay, so for mythosystems, what did you have? I feel like this was the hardest one for me to come up with.
Yeah, to me too, because it's like the interactions between like your family and school, like like the microsystem. So for me, his friend William Pitt, he's the one who like got him into advocating like for slave trade.
Was he the one that became prime minister, right?
Yeah.
It was Benedict Cumberbatch, right?
yeah, I know. I was like, that's Benedict! Like,
I was like, I can't believe he's in this movie. He must have gotten his start there.
Like, Dumbledore was in the movie? Yeah, okay. Anyways. But, so with William Pitt, the guy who was ambassador, but he, or whatever he was, but I thought about it how he brought in people, like his connections, his friends or whatever, and was able to connect Wilbur with them, and then that, obviously created like the team and the group that, was able to advocate on and stuff. So that was kind of my...
Yeah. I had that he went and he spoke at schools and in communities to raise awareness about slavery and beforehand... not slavery, but raise awareness for, animal rights and protection and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I did, because I remember him talking to the girl, or the girl was like, I went and saw you when I was at somewhere, Cambridge or something, And so I was like, oh, maybe that could be it. So that's what I had from Exosystem, but that one was hard for me to come up with.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you know how it all connects when it's just the movie?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then Exosystem, I had that he went to Parliament and produced the bill to abolish slavery and all of his work in the actual government stuff.
I did the one, hopefully this fits in the Exosystem, but where, you know, they were on that boat ride. I can't remember who took people,
That
all
was
those
so
people on the boat ride, and he showed up on the slave, like on the slave ship. I like.
Yeah,
really
and he
thought
made
that
him
was
stop
moving.
and smell.
That's what I kind of thought of as when they were able to reach these high respected people that actually, you know, that were really, that had a lot of influence in what was going on in the government and stuff. And so that was what I kind of talked about, how he was able to reach them through like them just seeing the slave ship and then realizing that so many people died on it, and that, you know, and like the smell, and he's like, remember this and stuff, because I don't think, it's kind of like a lot of issues now, we like kind of brush it under the rug, we don't know anything about it, so we're okay with it. And I think that was a thing that they need to realize, they need to get the truth out.
Yeah.
People to know in their eyes.
Yeah, and this kind of goes along with the next question, but it's like, what was the one guy that was like kind of his main group buddy throughout the thing, the one who showed up at the end and all the guys were like, oh no, it's a ruse type thing, you know, he had the long hair.
The long hair guy?
Yes, yes. Okay, and he said, we're here because you're a man who only believes it when he sees it, you know? And so I think that is so powerful to give them the visuals of the shackles, the scars that the men get when they're branded, and like the box with like how much space they have in the ships, and like the smell, you know. I think that's so much more powerful than words. And it's like, then even a video, you know, seeing it in real life is even more shocking. And so like the boat thing was like, I was like, good move, because they have to sit there and smell that nasty smell and really get a sense of how bad it is, because they can't just brush it under the rug, it's right in front of their faces. But yeah.
What did you do for Macro System?
So I just said that he went to the towns and the different people in England to get them to sign his petition and to like raise awareness for it.
Yeah, so that one was like, this one's hard because it talks about like culture, like I don't know, I was a little confused, and so, but I thought of how I think his name was James. He was the one that like came back. He like went to Hades. He went to like all this. He went to like the slave trade.
Oh,
right.
What
was going on.
The
I
lawyer
thought about
at the
how
end.
when he talked about the mom and the little and her child that were getting beaten, and then she was like, "Don't worry, someone's gonna save us, and it's gonna be William." And it just reminded me that like with culture, like it was changing, and like his wife was telling him that like, now that the war is gone, that like things are changing. People aren't so afraid anymore, and like that was kind of my spin on it.
No, that's good. That's good. Yeah. See, it's so nice because I hadn't even thought of that. Perfect.
Well, I was like, she's gonna think I'm like so wrong. I'm like,
no, that's really good.
But
okay.
Third one.
Number 3.
Yeah. So it says, how did Wilbur and his fellow advocates do and share their research? What evidence did they provide to persuade those opposing or on the fence? So, you know, one of the first things they did is what he was talking about, how they just need to get the truth out there. You know, shout it from the rooftops, you know, flyers everywhere, you know, make sure they're seeing it. And then, I'm going to say his name wrong. Well, Aquino, he was the man that was a slave before.
Yeah.
Aquino. What was his name? I don't know.
It was something like that, yeah.
He like,
I watched it a while.
wrote his story, which I think was really big. Like, he wrote a story and so many copies were being sold. Like, it's one thing to read like, you know, there'll be people who do the research, and then you can read all these articles who are like, oh yeah, we stole from this research and this is what we found. But it's like that's not as good as being able to go to like the real source and be able to like share your experiences, show the real stuff. And so I really found that cool that they were able to like firsthand share what was going on instead of just like hearing it through the grapevine almost.
Yeah, and I think having him there, someone who, and he was a prince in Africa, like someone from such a high status, like can be taken down to nothing, and just having his like personal testimony, I think, is really powerful for others to hear. And then they had the visual representations, which I think I would be most affected by, and that would really gain, like, especially those people who are on the fence, that would probably gain their support, because like they talked about in Parliament how there are compassionate people who want to do the right thing, but that doesn't necessarily compel them to do the right thing because they still want to be accepted and they don't want people to go against them. But I think seeing them, like seeing the shackles and smelling the smell and everything, I think that might put them over the edge to where it's like, okay, I have a duty to help these people because they are people. And it's crazy that they said, like, how many started. I think it was like 600 started the journey to the Indies and only 200 survived. I was like, oh my gosh, that is just crazy. So I think, like, yeah, that definitely helps, is having the real stuff right there.
Definitely. Also with like the, I know a lot of the, who was it? The people that opposed him were like, how do we know that like people even care about this? You know, like you're the only one.
How do you know the slaves don't like having it because they could be dying somewhere? At least they have a place to live. And they also brought up, like,
you know, voice of the people. They're like, no one cares. Like, everyone's on our side. And when they brought in that, like, the
huge petition.
And, and showed, like, how many people had written on it and just, like, had signed it in just a year, you know? Like, and with only the amount that they were able to get out, you know, like, all their voices out. And so I think if they would have been able to, you know, speak out louder than they could have and, like, had a longer period for people to sign the petition, it would have been even huger.
Well, yeah.
So, which was cool.
Well, that, and, like, think about today, what we can do with our technology and stuff. I mean, we can reach not only people in our own, like, country or own region, but we can reach people all over the world in, like, a matter of seconds. And I'm like, it's so much easier for us, yet we don't really care to do it, you know?
Yeah. I took I took the developing world this semester, and we like looked up this website where it was like these people from Africa or like developing countries who were like, I need your help, like this is what I'm trying to do, I just need some money. And it's amazing to me how these things are there, but hardly any of us know about it. Or like, I always admire, I had a family who like they saved up money so that they could buy a calf for a family like down in a developing country. And I always thought that was really cool, but like not a lot of people did it, or like, you know, even though we have all this technology, but people just like keep to themselves, you know.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, but.
Okay. Anything else on that one? But yeah, they went around to different villages and towns in England educating people. And that's another thing, like, they had to do a lot of work to, like, bring awareness. Like, they had to travel for days and weeks and go to all these different villages and towns. Like, it was a lot of work to do this. So that shows you how passionate this group of people really was to get this fixed.
It makes me think because, you know, like, there's a lot of people trying to advocate nowadays, but all they do is put their stuff on, like, a website, you know, and, like, hey, just read this and then be motivated, you know? But it's those, you know, those groups that get out there and actually go and speak, or they're, you know, doing things that, like...
They're the ones that affect change.
Yeah.
So true. Okay, number 4. How does the film portray the importance of working together as a group? What has family advocacy group work taught you? So what I kind of got from, like, groups is, like, kind of like what we do in our HOA sessions. Like, someone can have a different insight or a different solution to a problem or a different way around something that one may not have even thought of before. And, like, when one runs out of that drive or persistence, you have another one to kind of, like, pull you back in and like dust you off and help you kind of get that zeal back a little bit. And then what else do I have? Oh, and it was especially good back then because they were able to spread out and cover more area since they did have to go by horse to like the different villages and stuff. And just, I think there's strength in numbers. It's like the more people you have in support of your argument or your view, the more you'll be heard, especially by government.
Yeah, definitely. So I put how like their first meeting after Wilbur like announced that he like announced to the House, like about abolishment, and then Fox came in, but they were like before that they were all in that meeting, they were all disagreeing. They were all there to abolish slavery, like to advocate for it, but they just kept disagreeing about it because I don't think they had come to an agreement or true understanding of what they needed to do and what they truly wanted to accomplish. But once they were able to like set goals and realize what they were doing, they became stronger. And then also like these men and women that were in there were like so different. There were politicians, there were lawyers, there was a man who was a slave, and just like all different, but they all had different strengths and different connections that helped. So I think like with diversity really works and using everyone's strength to because William Wilberforce, whatever, he was the voice, but he still needed all those people to give him the connection. So, I mean, one voice makes a difference, but when you have like a group, it's like a lot more profound and stuff. So that's kind of what I got from it.
And I like how you mentioned how everyone has their own strengths, and that's like in the church we talk about how many hands make light work. It's like, yes, we all have weaknesses, but you're bound to have someone who has a strength that is one of your weaknesses. So they kind of fill the void and pick up the slack where you can't, And so that's why groups are so important. And they're just more influential. People believe it's like the witness of two. Like they believe you a lot more if there's two of you or more that understand the same thing.
People backing you up.
Yeah. Okay. Number 5, what parallels do you see between Wilbur and Captain Moroni in Alma 46? What is a Christian and professional family advocate, and how did Wilbur exemplify that? How can you be effective and Christ-like against such loud and often degrading voices?
For me, I talked about how both of them realized that like they had a like God had a role for them. Like this was something that God really wants them to do. Then also, so like William didn't have like a title of liberty, but I felt like almost his voice and his like purpose was the title of livity. When he was able to stand up and reach to people's hearts, like this is why, now stand behind me, was almost like his title of liberty.
Yeah, I put both Wilbur and Captain Moroni definitely had a passion, and like they had the why, they had the why behind what they were doing, and they had God on their side. And I think that if God is on your side, then that's the most important thing that you have.
That's the best person you could have on your side.
Yeah.
Instead of anyone.
And so I think that both a Christian and a professional advocate both need that passion and zeal for the cause and a true desire and a belief that this is something that needs to change and something that has to change. And they don't give up just because they encounter setbacks. They just dust themselves off and they keep going. Let's see. Talked about... Oh, and then I talked about how I can be effective, and this is something that I really struggle on because I don't want to cause confrontation, because I have some family members that are like liberals in my immediate family, and most of my family is like super Republican. And so every time when we get together with them, like they try to like start fights and advocate for liberal type things, and so I have just learned to kind of shut down, because in a family sense you don't want to cause rifts and stuff, but I know that in advocating it's different because it's not to family, it's just to society. And so I talked about how I need to be better at voicing my opinions as freely as those with opposing views do. I feel like nowadays, if you have a view that doesn't coincide with society's view, that you can't have your opinion. Like, if it's against what everyone else thinks, like if you're pro traditional families and against gay marriage, you can't have your opinion. You get totally degraded and just ripped on if you have that. And I just think that is so not cool, because we still respect people who have views of gay marriage as good. You know, we still give them that respect. We should get that respect back. So I just need to make sure that I am voicing my opinions and that I have the Lord, His will, and His principles as my backing and as my kind of drive to state what I believe. So
with that, I think you have to remember to be Christ-like, and so I kind of put, like, if you're fighting against, like, the evil side or whatever you want to call it, and you're acting evil, like, that's not going to get you anywhere.
Right.
So you have to look back to, you know, your morals and what you believe in, and, you know, Heavenly Father. And it makes me think of, I don't know if you ever watched this, what was it? Heather Holland gave a talk with the CES broadcast, yeah, like a couple years ago, and it's like the famous phrase that he uses, you never check your religion at the door.
Yeah.
And I found it so profound that, like, especially in advocating, it's so easy to, like, be in a discussion and, like, get heated and get, you know, and especially, like, in Wilbur's, like, situation, he could just get so mad and so angry, but I think, you know, you got to make sure that your religion is still intact with you, that you are holding on to what you believe in, and you're not, you know, stooping lower than them.
Yeah, there's a very fine line between being persistent and being just nasty.
Yeah.
No, that's a great thought. That's a good thought. Okay. Are we ready to go on to 6?
Yeah. It says, Marcia Barlow spoke on persuasive speaking and writing. Did Wilbur and others exemplify any of Marcia's ideas? How so? And one is, she talked a lot about storytelling and then trying to relate it to other people. And I think that was really, they did that a lot. You know, they shared the examples, you know, the real stuff that people could relate to or be able to sympathize for, which I think is really big. Because I know for me, I was moved reading, like, you know, listening to it and hearing, like, this is where the slaves, you know, this is where they, you know, they have to be cooped up in this, and this is where, you know, they get, like, the reason they have all these, like, the handcuffs or, like, the legs on is so they don't throw themselves overboard. And just, like, hearing that stuff, and it's just, like, the stories and the stuff like that.
Yeah, that, and they were relevant, like, because she did talk about storytelling and making sure that you don't just, you know, like, babble on and on and on, but that they're actually relevant to the cause and to the point you're trying to make. And it was so powerful, because I was really affected by that part too, when the guy with the crazy name, he was the slave.
I think
when he's showing him through the slave ship, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, because we don't have to deal with slavery, and so that just kind of helped me even get a mental picture, even though it was just a movie. But another thing that I thought, so they had personal testimonies and experiences, which are really good. They used their visuals. They had passion. They didn't give up, and they discussed and addressed the other side of you. They did discuss how they understand that this is not economically good. I'm like brain dead by this point at finals week. It's not economically smart, because they get a lot of money. The country gets a lot of money from slave trade, honestly. And so they understood that part, and they understood, like, the French are going to take over and all that kind of stuff, but there's also a duty to do what's right, no matter what the consequences. And so I think that's what I got from some of what they did, Marcia's stuff.
There was a guy that opposed them, and he stood up. I'm trying to remember. They were trying to get him on their side, so at first he started off his speech, like, saying that he was going for, like, to abolish slavery, So he like stated, you know, what he believes, and then he was like, but I have to go with them. So he gave both point of views, which was cool. Instead of standing up and just saying, this is what I believe, and then sat
Right.
down, like, this is what I'm sticking with. So it, you know, it was understandable as to like why he chose what he chose, and it made for a better speech and an understanding, I think.
Yeah.
And he was able to get both sides.
Yeah, I think he was the one that had denied some family to be taken to slavery, right? It was the Scottish guy.
I think so.
And
yeah.
they were like, he was compassionate once. What says he can't do it again? So, yeah, that was really cool. Yeah, that's a good, oh my gosh, example. I can't think of the word example. Okay. Any more on that one?
I don't think so.
Okay, number 7. What role did the government, policy, and religious freedom play in the fight of slave trade? Did you see their political system being pro-family? Why or why not? Oh, go ahead. You can go.
Oh, I don't know if I'm going to answer this right. So I don't know if I get the question totally, but for me, when like with the government and the policy, they were totally against it, obviously. Like, and I found it more as like their political system wasn't totally pro-family. It still kind of felt very individualized, still worrying about like the me and not like the family. Because I feel like when you're focusing on the family, you're trying not to be selfish, and it felt a lot of selfishness was going in. They were about like with like so that will have like slaves like even they have so much, you know, like back there, but that, you know.
And they talked about how like we have people here that don't even have bread, you know. And I was like, yeah, but they're not being beaten every day.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Did you have more?
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Let's see. But yeah, I agree. I saw it as not being pro-family because they were more concerned with like the bottom line than human lives. And I feel like if you're pro-family, then you're pro-humans, like human rights, because you're concerned about the well-being of people and of their relationships, no matter what color they are, you know. And then I kind of talked about how the men in Parliament were of high standing, and so it's not a representative group of the whole population, and I think that could have been like a big problem because they don't know what it's like to have nothing, you know, and they don't know what it's like to not have rights because men of high standing, they have rights, they have their big houses, they have their honor and their respect just from their status in life. And so I don't know that they were able to fully understand.
Like, also with that, I remember Wilbur and his friend William Pitt, the one, Benedict Crump, you know, they they're never gonna let young people like us into the house again, you know, but it was very divided. You could see the old people who had been there for a while, you know, and then there was a very small population of the younger generation, which I think makes a difference. If it was mixed, I think you know that would affect, you know, a lot bills they passed and stuff. But because it was a traditional way, and you know, you have the older people, it was hard to implement things like that. So
right, like the older men are definitely way traditional, and like it's been this way for 30,000 years. We can't change it. And then the new guys come in and they're like, let's change everything, you know. But I think it would be better to have that mix. But it's all about family lineage back then. But yeah, I think that's all I have. Oh, and I said that the government was really against abolishing slave trade because it was a source of income. And then who would be working the fields? Like, who would be doing the hard work that they didn't want their people because they're too awesome to do it, you know. And then religious freedom.
Yeah, with religious freedom, I kind of
people usually felt bad and had sympathy once they heard the facts, but it wasn't enough to gain the support for abolishing slavery type thing. I don't know if that's really right, but I was like, I don't know.
Well, yeah, and then also I kind of felt, when he first was thinking about advocating for slave trade, and then his friend was like, "You sound like a religious man. Like, what's wrong with you?" And then they kind of made these comments like almost like, "Why are you being religious?" In that, like in Parliament, it kind of felt like it. Like, I don't, at least that's what I got from it, that they like didn't want to hear like this, like because you're advocating this because of religion, like they were trying to separate, church and state in a sense, even like back then, and so that's kind of what I felt like.
Yeah, good thought. Okay. Number 8. Do you feel that Wilbur used his time on Earth well? How did you see him showing the elements of consecration that Elder Christofferson spoke of? And I said he definitely used his time wisely, because he used it to advocate and change a really big issue that didn't just affect, like, governments, it affected real people in a really bad way, and he saved lives of countless numbers of people, and he freed so many people, and I think he truly consecrated himself. He sacrificed his well-being for the well-being of others. Like, he was sick, and I don't know, he was just totally worn out from this whole thing, and he was haunted until he got it done, and he used all of his energy and to get it fixed for these people he didn't even know.
Yeah. In Elder Christofferson's talk, it talks about like how a consecrated life is a life full of labor, and like you're doing God's purpose. And so I noticed like he didn't stop there. He advocated for so many different things, and even before then, like there's probably a huge list of things that he changed, and I feel like there's a lot of people who get so focused on the one thing they're advocating for that, like, once that's done, it's kind of like, all right, like...
It's like, ooh, I'm done.
Yeah, I served my purpose, and then now I'm cool. But he was like, that's not enough. Like, and I think at the end, it kind of had some words out. It was some sentences, and it talked about, hey, his second goal was to change the world. And I really think he did, especially with slave trade, obviously. Yeah. But, like... he was searching out for something more, and he knew that, like, this was something that was bigger than him, that God wanted him to do this, like, which I thought was pretty cool. So.
Yeah, he was truly the definition of consecration.
Mm-hmm.
I love that it's, like, a lifelong, or a life of labor.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
I like how this wasn't about him, because really, if he hadn't abolished slavery, I don't think it really would have affected him very much. He didn't have a slave. He wasn't going to be a slave, So but it was something that he believed and he knew he needed to do. And I think a lot of people go out and advocating because it's affecting them, or or the only reason they get
involved. I need more funding for the school because my child needs a better education.
Yeah. And
Which is still good because it gets change to happen, but...
I think some of the best causes are those where it's just like, you hear these stories of people who are like, no, I just felt like this is right, so this is why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it to gain anything, or,
Right.
And so that's what I really, part of the consecrated, lifestyle is, you're doing it for a bigger purpose.
Right, it's
like your own selfishness.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, that was a really good insight. Okay, number 9. You want to read number 9?
Yeah. It says, any other profound thoughts or personal insights from the movie that are related to children and family advocacy? I don't know if I said this. I might have. But I really liked how the preacher told William to make sure he is in the world but not of the world. Because I think it's so easy, kind of like checking your religion at the door. It's so easy to get wrapped up in your cause that you're slowly becoming the world instead of, trying. And I think that's something that a lot of us need to remember, that we don't get caught up and get so worried about what we're trying to do that we forget, our morals and and stuff like that. So that was one I liked.
Yeah, and I think what really kind of helped me, or what I thought of, was the fact that really one person can make a difference if you're passionate enough, and a group of people can make a difference. And it might take a long time, and it might take a lot of persistence, but it is possible. And like Wilbur and his group really showed me that. And it's just like, look at the effect that he made, not just on the generation that were slaves and not just on the slaves that got freed from this, but like their families. Now their families and their families' family, like generations to come, they're now free, you know? So it's like when we make changes in the world, it's not just right now. It's like you changed the world for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Well, it makes me think of, this is going off on a tangent real quick, but you know, when everyone knocks on how like, oh, you're just a mom, yada yada yada.
Right.
But it's like, I don't think, they don't understand the power that a mom has, and that she's, creating and teaching a child that's going to go out and could touch the world,
Right.
And so that's kind of just what I want to relate back to, that just, it's sad when people don't think of that, and it's so selfish, but yet, like, it's, these mothers are doing great things to, to contribute to the world. It may be small, and, like, I know for me, I want to do something grand, but I, like, have no idea, like, how I'm going to affect, like, change the world, but I think
know.
you have to remember, like, it's, like, almost like rippled effects, like,
Yeah.
knowing that I am going to contribute with, like, children that are hopefully going to be good
Responsible.
kids who will go out and do something. Like, cross your fingers that they're good. And that's good enough for me to know that, like, they can make an impact, and it, like, gets bigger and bigger. So.
Well, it's like the children we raise, they'll be raising children. Like like what Brother Satterfield said. No one will get my references when they hear this back, but like he talked about how parents are raising future parents,
Mm-hmm.
So like how we do will be evident in how they parent and how well of a parent they are. And I'm like, oh man, that's a even bigger responsibility. I just thought I was raising kids, not parents. But it's so true. It's like you're not just affecting one person or a group of people. You're affecting what comes from those group of people too. It's crazy. Let's see. Oh, and then I also talked about how, like, what is stopping us to advocate for what we believe in? Because with technology now, it's so easy and so accessible. We have no excuse not to do it. Yeah, and that's pretty much it, because I kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. But it's just like, what is stopping us? We have no excuses to not advocate and try and affect change. It's so easy.
I liked how his butler said to him, like, it was a quote he read from a book, and it was like, it's a shame to die well known to everyone else, yet unwell known to yourself. And I found that really profound, how, people may know you, but you may not know, like, you and your cause. And I think that William, like, found himself as he, did this. He found, like, his purpose, but also, like, what he stands for. I think he like, wasn't sure if he wanted to, represent God or, go and proclaim to Parliament and stuff. And I think he found himself, and it's also, like, with advocating, it's easy, you can find yourself, but then you can also lose yourself. So there's, like, a balance you have to find. So.
Well, and it's like we learn in church, we are meant to be on this world to challenge ourselves and to stretch and to grow. And I think that happens through advocacy and through serving others, that we truly find ourselves and kind of find what we're made of. If we don't ever challenge ourselves, we don't know what our potential is, How are we ever going to reach our full potential if we don't try and try new things and go out of our comfort zones?
Especially going back to the book we read, The Sacred Duty, like, he found himself, like, doing something he didn't expect to do. And then that, rippled on, and he was able to do a lot more. But, he had no idea, like, what effect he would have and stuff like that. So.
Yeah. Very true.
Okay. Number 10. What was your understanding of the doctrine of the family at the beginning of the semester, and how has it changed? With the doctrine, I didn't see the importance of like knowing the doctrine and believing it and like having a testimony in it, and then being able to read all these things and learn about it. It come to me that like knowing the doctrine is important, but then also growing your doctrine to make sure that you're strengthening it and like growing it like a testimony, or else as you advocate, it's just gonna like wither out, and you're gonna be like, well, why am I even doing this? So it's really important to hold on to it. So that was one of mine.
Yeah, and just kind of like what you said towards the beginning, like the doctrine needs to be your foundation, and if you don't know the doctrine, then you don't have a foundation, you don't have your purpose, and you don't have that thing that keeps you going at the end of the day. And I also learned, just reading from the textbooks and things, how many things influence our lives and influence our families and our children. And I need to understand those, the good and the bad things, so that I can protect and that I can advocate for other things, that I can protect my children from certain things I don't want them to be exposed to, and I can advocate and encourage other things that are good for them, And I learned about how we need to be very intentional in teaching our children the doctrine so that they understand it from a really young age, and so that they can stand firm and not waver in their beliefs as they grow up, and so that they can kind of become advocates from the very beginning, and be that beacon of light in the ever-growing and darkening world.
With, talking about family advocacy and stuff, it like came to me how there's a lot of people that realize families are important, but they don't know why the family's important. And with the gospel, we know why. We know that like this is the plan, this is Heavenly Father's, it's all connected, but a lot of people don't know that. So it's important to make sure that like, I think, get your voice out and tell people, but also show by example is very important, which is something I was reminded about in this semester, is making sure you're living what you want people to know or believe. Make sure that you're being that example they can look at. So. Right.
Modeling is very, important. And it's like we're representatives of our church, and if we're not doing what we're supposed to, then we put a bad picture with the church. Like, I've heard of those missionaries that go to, Hooters and stuff, or I think I read, I read something in one of my classes, and a kid was talking about how he was a missionary in, Malaysia maybe, I don't know, somewhere over there, and there was this cabbage field that was close to rotting, and it looked like it had been abandoned, and they just looked at each other. They were like, oh, we need cabbage, we should just take one. And he was like, but what if someone saw us taking that cabbage, and then in this foreign land, someone would be like, oh, missionaries are bad, they steal, It's like it just puts a bad representation on the church and on what we stand for, so it's so important to live what we talk, to not just be those Sunday Mormons who say we're so righteous and so awesome on Sunday, but then live a completely different thing during the week.
I was always reminded of that in high school, because obviously I was known as one of the Mormons, but then there's always be those people who weren't Mormon and be like, wait, they look at you when you did something that, they thought didn't align with your church, and it, didn't, but, if one of my friends, cussed that were Mormon,
right.
A lot of people would be like, wait, no, you can't cuss, and it wasn't like they were mad that we cussed, but it was just the idea no, you have these morals and we expect you to hold on to them, and they put us high, almost high on a pedestal, that we hold these up, and so we need to remember that so that we are still being that example to them, even though they may never come to the church, but they'll know that we have these high morals that we stick to, and it'll affect them later on, and they'll remember.
Yeah. So true. Okay, So the last one is picture your spouse and children, current or future, and write down some thoughts about how they will benefit from you taking this class. Some things that the first thing that I put is I now know how to better stand up for my beliefs and how to actually do that in an effective way, and not just like, I think gay marriage is bad, not just having like like a vague belief, but like I know how to research and understand why I believe what I believe, and I know how to better gain support from others because I'm more prepared.
I think it was last lesson we talked about, moms in the home, and I can't remember what the assignment was, but I was like reflecting back on like if my parents, like, did they read the news? I mean, did they listen to the news?
Yeah.
Did they talk about it openly? And like my parents, like they were into, like my dad's on the school board. I've helped my uncle run for state senate and stuff, but like they never talked about like what they believed, or and we never really talked about what was going on in the news and stuff. And I think that reflected on me because I don't know as much as I wish I knew, and like
Yeah.
I was the worst when it came to government in high school. Like, glad I passed that class, but I just didn't know. And a lot of my friends that did know was because their parents talked about it. And I want that for my kids. I want them to know that, like, I'm current on events and I'm paying attention, and I don't want to sway their belief anyway, but I want them to know that, like, I'm paying attention and this is what I believe, but obviously you can believe whatever you want.
Yeah.
So that was a big one for me.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because I hadn't, and it's, what am I trying to say here? I think it's interesting that they said to talk with your children about what's going on in the news, and that was kind of a scary thought to me because I was like, I don't know that I want my children to be exposed to all of that, like, scary stuff, because the world is scary, especially, like, all the wars and things happening, but there's a way that we can inform them without scaring them. And I think that's important, is you have to relate it to them and explain it on a field that they can understand and not be scared by it, but just more of like, this is just what's going on, this is what we have to be aware of, that kind of stuff.
Definitely with that, like, now that there's technology, it's so easy to get your hands on, like, the news and stuff, and I want I just think of, like, how there's the controversy now about, what is it, the physical education, the classes now that, like, kids could be learning about these things, and, like, they could learn it from their teacher instead of you, and I want to be that person that tells my kids about this stuff first. It's like, even the news, like, I want them to hear what I have to say about it, and, like, they learn instead of going to school and hearing it from someone else and hearing the wrong information.
Right.
Or, being skewed the wrong way because of misinformation. And so.
Yeah, that was one of my bullets too. I said, I know what things I want to allow in my home and what things I don't want to be present in my home, and I know what I want to teach my kids and what I don't want them to be taught by the world. And I don't think it was for this class, but there was a talk, and it was like, there's nothing that your children should learn. It was talking about church, but there's nothing that your children should learn in church that hasn't already been taught in the home. And I think that applies, because I don't want my kids to be learning about, like, controversial topics or topics that society doesn't agree with us on, like marriage or sex before marriage and those types of things. I want them to hear that stuff from me, because I don't want them to be confused by the world before I've had a chance to talk to them about it. And it's just like, when is the time? Because it seems like earlier and earlier now they're being exposed to those things, whether we like it or not. And it's like, how do I tell my 8-year-old about these things,
Yeah, that's why I almost feel like you have to find
a way to relate.
Yeah, you have to ponder on it, and then you have to figure out how you can tell them in a way they'll understand, which is, like, hard. But
I know, and thankfully the church has put out a lot of things that can help us with that. But another point I had was that I said that I know there are a lot of bad things in the world, but I also know that there are a lot of good things too. And this kind of was supported by conference, how I think it was Elder Perry talked about how they went to the Vatican and said that we're still the majority regardless of what like Hollywood portrays. And then Brother Satterfield talked about this in class too. He said any enemy, because we're in a war between good and evil right now on earth, and any enemy will want you to be intimidated and think that his army is bigger than yours. And so, like, I feel like I've been kind of having that view, like, oh my gosh, there are so many more bad things in the world. How am I ever going to teach my kids what's right? And, like, how are they ever going to be able to survive in this world? But the good is still the majority. It's just not as broadcast. And I thought that was super interesting. And I listened to that talk and I was like, oh, wow. I just kind of had a sigh of relief. And I was just like, that is so cool. But we're still, like, the same. We have the same beliefs as most people do. Like, most people still believe in traditional marriage and in stuff like that. So I thought that was really cool.
Definitely. I also, like, with this class, it helped me to realize, like, that I do have a voice and that, you know, what I say, like, can affect people. And so I want my children to know that you know, that they should take a stance. It's so easy to follow with the crowd and, like, because you don't want to stand out. You don't want to, like, especially, like, in school when someone says something stupid and you're like, oh, yeah, because you don't want to be put on the spot as, like, the one that doesn't agree with them. But I want my kids to be that person that's like, no, that's not okay. That's not what I believe in. I want them to feel confident in that. Because obviously I wasn't like that. I was really shy and like, oh, I'm not going to say what I want to say. Like, and I don't want it to be like that. And then also, I want them, like, from this class that I've learned is, you know, study it out. Like, figure out what you believe and why you believe it. You know, with the doctrine, principles, and application, I want them to study it out both ways, like, figure it out. But then, I mean, hopefully they'll come back to, you know, what's right. But, like, I don't want them to read something and be like, okay, yeah, that's what I would believe, or that's what my mom believes.
Or just take mom and dad's word for it, you know?
Yeah, because, I mean, it's like the testimony. Leaning on your parents' testimony is only going to get you so far for so long.
Right. That's not where the passion comes from. But, yeah, I think that's so important. The first thing you said about how you want your children to know that it's okay to take a stand. And I think that's something we have to teach them to do. You know, we have to teach them to be independent, and we have to teach them, and that's something I've learned from this class. We pretty much influence what our children become from a very young age. That's, like, already in motion, you know. And it kind of reminded me of an experience I had in junior high is when Mitt Romney was running for president first, and I was the only Mormon in my whole school. My 8th grade science teacher gets up and she's like, I can't believe there's a black man and a Mormon running for president. And I was like, and then she just started going off on Mormons and how they're polygamists and all this kind of stuff. And I raised my hand and I was like, I was scared out of my mind. My heart was pounding, but it was like the spirit was just like, you got to say something. You got to say something. I was like, I'm a Mormon and we're not polygamists. And that's all I said. And she, like, her face went white, and you could tell that she felt so bad and so embarrassed because here's one of her students, a Mormon, sitting in her class, and she's bashing them. And I'm just like, and she could have gotten in so much trouble because you're not supposed to mix politics or religion in your class. But I was just like, after that, I was like, okay, I knew I did the right thing. It's like sweating and so nervous. But it's like, it's really important to share our beliefs because if I hadn't, then all of the people in my class would have thought that Mormons were polygamists because it's like that appeal to authority. The teacher says it, so you believe it, you know, if you don't know otherwise. It's like one person really can make a difference, and that's just a really cool thought.
And also with that, I think, like, you know, taking your experience, like, you know, being able to, like, defend your church, like, you earn respect. They may not believe what you believe, but they know that, like, you are going to stand up for what you believe in. And that I think that's great. Like, I love hearing those people that stand up for what they believe. I may not believe in it, but I respect them because they actually, are using their voice. They're actually taking a stance, and most of us are just, like, you know, too quiet to say anything.
Yeah.
So.
It's the only time that I've ever done that. Every other time I'm just like, I'm not going to say anything. I was way more brave as a kid. But, well, I think that's all the
Alrighty.
thoughts I had.
Yeah, me too. So I think that's
We're good on
it.
time.
Oh yeah, that's perfect. Okay.
Alrighty.
I don't think we have to conclude or anything. I think that's
I don't think so either. Thanks for
okay.
meeting with me.
Yeah, no problem. The girl like was like, "Oh yeah, like I don't care, go ahead." Like, cause I was in another group, and she's like, "Cool, like whatever." I was like, "Okay." Like,
Yeah. Well, the girls that I were with, I think they're single moms.